Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you today. Like Rhea said, my background is in engineering. I got my degree in engineering mechanics from the University of Wisconsin. Engineering mechanics is an odd degree. It's not mechanical engineering and it's not material science. It's fracture, fatigue, and failure. And so over several years working for the US Navy on nuclear reactors, I got to leverage that engineering training. But what I found is actually what drew me into problems was leading changes around resolving organizational issues. So actually doing fracture, fatigue, and failure on organizations. What were they designed to do and why isn't that happening? And how could I leverage my engineering techniques and the lessons I learned, whether working with John Cotter or I've learned a lot from Dave Snowden, and use those in a large organization to resolve conflicts in the organization so it could make the changes it wanted to make. And I'm excited to share with you today then that practitioner's perspective. So an engineering-based, but a practitioner's perspective of real stories and concepts that I've created that have helped other change agents in large organizations or in communities make the changes they wanted to make. So the theme of today's talk is Upcycle Your Change. And I don't know if all of you have started to follow this new trend of upcycling that is plastered my Facebook page and Twitter feed with pictures of people taking common household goods or things that you would have thought would have gone to the garbage heap, and rather than recycling them or getting rid of them, and recycling being, pulling them apart into the requisite parts, pulverizing them and reusing them, but actually taking them in their original state and coming up with a new way to use them that gives them a second life. That's upcycling. And I find this really a curious process that people are going through, because what it shows you is if you can just change how you look at some things that are right around you, you can find amazing opportunities to create new things in your organization. So a few examples of upcycling. I'm a book lover, so I love this concept of finding an old paint-splattered ladder and turning it into a bookshelf. Because at least for me, I can never have enough bookshelves in my house. But what a neat idea to use something that might have long past its purpose, right? You get one of those new metal ladders that collapses down and everything. What do you do with your old paint-splattered ladder? Why not use it as a bookshelf? There's a woman in the town that I come from, Bremerton, Washington, who decided to look at how could she reuse French fry oil, which all these restaurants are throwing away, and repurpose it with a byproduct from biodiesel, which is glycerin, and use it to make pure soaps. And especially with all of the folks that are out there that are getting skin sensitivities and allergies to various additives, she's created something worthwhile and useful that fills a gap for folks out of things other people would throw away. It's actually a really great company, and that's their logo, and you can find them online if that appeals to you. But if you apply this to change agents, can we relook at ourselves and those around us to say who out there can be a change agent? Now, my level in the organization that I'm in my day job, working for the US Navy, is I'm just a first-level manager, in obviously a large hierarchy. But on top of that job, I blog about change management, and I do jobs like this on the side, because I believe strongly that so many more people in organizations can lead changes that matter to them to help their organizations through that transition point that Dave was talking about. We can't just rely on a few at the top to come up with those big changes and dictate them down to us. All of us can have a role in that, and anyone can become a powerful change leader. But if you go into the research and you read the business books, most of them aren't written for folks at a working level. The main character is always the plant manager or the CEO or somebody in that C-suite who's got all of this vast power to leverage a large organization to do what they want. So I don't know about you, but when I read those, it leaves me struggling to say, well, if only I were the boss, then I could do these great things. Does anybody else ever feel that way? Right? And how many of us in these large organizations are going to get that opportunity, even if we put in 20 or 30 or 40 years? So what does that leave us with if that's not in our future? Well, the problem is that a lot of folks end up trying to pretend in some way that they're a boss when they lead those changes, even if they aren't. And in my experience, we go out and do something like this. And whether it's metaphorically, I hope it's metaphorically, unless anybody will actually admit they bring their whip to work, we go out and look for a way to borrow authority from someone who has it, and then we proceed to turn around and find the people we want to force forward towards our change. And this picture, yes, this is my artwork. Be very impressed with my engineering skills, right? But it's all purposeful in this drawing. Either we're the aggressor or we're the victims, but this is how most people make change. This is how it's modeled to us. This is the example we're given. Find authority, use it to compel people forward. And that big red spiky mountain that's the change before them, isn't that how it looks to a lot of us? Where we're struggling to see, why do I want to go there? What's the real incentive? Am I just going there to get away from the pain? Or just going to get whatever carrot they've put out in front of me? We call this driving people, because the operative force here, if you're thinking about it from that mechanic standpoint, is I am being compelled or I'm compelling. And what happens then when the boss or goes away, who's whipping you, or the authority that you've borrowed that authority from goes away? In your change, it stops, right? So what have you really accomplished? Just a lot of painful effort and few successes. And actually, according to some of the research that I've looked at, anywhere from 50% to 85% of changes in organizations fail. What other process would we keep doing over and over and over again that had that level of failure rate? It's astonishing. So I go back to history and to my heroes and look for the things that they told us about how to make change. And President Theodore Roosevelt was a phenomenal change agent. Everything that he encountered, he changed in a significant way. And this is one of my favorite quotes from him, and I'll read it with certain emphasis so that you understand the operative part of this quote. Do what you can with what you have where you are. And what does that lead to? It changes the way you make change. Rather than driving people, you drive a change. You say, I see this vision, and I want to go there, and I'm going to go first. And you act, right? Some people call this walking the talk. We wish other people would do it, but how much do we focus on doing it ourselves and being that example? If you're driving change, you start with yourself, and you're the example. I'm going to do this. I'm choosing this change. Who wants to join me? And in my experience, when you make this explicit, when you do this intentionally, and you claim, I'm going here, who wants to go with me, and you turn around, there are people raising their hand. They want to go there too. You've had those conversations around the water cooler. You've had them at night after work over a few beers. People say, I wish someone would only go do this. Well, in driving change, that person can be you. And if you do that, what I've found is you will have joyful effort, that energy and enthusiasm and that camaraderie of making the change, and you will get many successes. It's actually quite astonishing in comparison how many changes succeed when you do this versus the typical model we follow of finding the authority and whipping people forward. So which one you choose matters. And I share these with you today because a lot of times it seems that we only think in our organizations that the one option open to me is to drive people. It was the hole I fell into early in my career when I was trying to make changes. I thought, I'll get the boss's permission, I'll use all my urgency, and I will compel people to come to my meetings. I will tattle on them to the boss when they don't show up. I won't check to see what their workload is before I give them more work. And not surprisingly, people stopped showing up at my meetings. I've since gone back and apologized to those folks because I really went over the top. But I didn't know anything else. I was modeling the behavior I'd seen before me. So I offer to you that alternative of driving change because there is something else you can do. And being an engineer, I always have to have one chart or graph in every presentation. And I found this useful to demonstrate the difference qualitatively between the two approaches. So energy, going up the vertical axis, the energy that you have and you can gather to drive the implementation, and then the distance to the goal state. And energy over distance is power under the curve, right? So those are the power curves. So if you've been involved with a driving people change, maybe you had an audit or an inspection, and you were given a finding, and you had to go and complete the actions to resolve the finding. Typically what happens is the boss receives that, and then he assigns you're going to be the lead. And so you're required to form a team of the following conscripts from various organizations, right? How many of you have been a conscript before? Yeah? And what happens is the team meets for a little while. You get that initial burst of energy where maybe you think, hey, this time we'll maybe really make a difference on this. Maybe a few folks sneak into the team who actually are really excited that you got that finding. Ever been one of those people, right? And the team mutters along until the VP asks for status, and then maybe they ask for status one more time, and the next audit comes, and the next distraction comes, and oh, the team just fades away. And is anybody sad that it died? Usually not. And this is what we repeat and repeat and repeat in organizations. But there's something else we can do. If we choose to drive change, we're saying, I believe this change is important, and I want to make it happen. So I have that energy to start. And then I go and I look for folks who have energy too. And we form a team and we work on this. And it's not a smooth road. If you've been part of one of these successful changes in the past, you've felt that, where you move along, and yeah, there are challenges, and yeah, there are obstacles. But you overcome them together because you've got that energy stored up. So even when you get to that big dip there, you still have enough energy to overcome it and get to that big win. Yesterday in the class I referenced that big dip in historical terms. If you know the history of the journey of Lewis and Clark, then you know that they were told that when they got to the headwaters of the Missouri, they should crest the hillside, smell the salt in the air, and hear the seabirds and see the ocean. It's August 12th, 1805. Meriwether Lewis and a small band from the Corps of Discovery had gone ahead. They found the headwaters. He prepares himself to cross the Continental Divide. Step, 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 and he looks out and sees Idaho. That was that bottom of that dip. It's August. In that area, winter's going to come on. They don't have horses. If you know the rest of the story, you know that the Indian woman they have along with them runs into her long-lost brother, Cameawait. They get the horses. They continue down. They still have plenty of challenges, including rafting down the Snake River with all of the native tribes watching along the shore to see if these men would die, and they didn't. But they got to their win. So if they can persevere when they get to that end point, because they still had energy and enthusiasm for their change, why can't you with whatever you're hoping to drive in your organization? And you get to that big win and you feel victorious. Think of them getting to ocean in view, right? Really close to here. But then if they just, wipe their hands of it and walk off, like some folks do when they issue something or make a change or get to that, whatever endpoint you've put there, if you all just walk away then, it's like a big microphone drop. And how many people have come back a week or a month after they got a big win with a change and found that nothing has really changed, right? Happens too often because we don't focus on that completion, that sustainment steps afterwards. So what this is meant to show you is that even after your big win, there's more to that sustainment. How do you embed the change in your organization? Who's going to really take it on? Who's going to own the budgeting and the head count and make sure it succeeds, which might not be the same people that started it. Some people love to start things, other people love to sustain them. But you have to figure that part out and be consistent with that. But if you keep that driving change piece, where you're still finding people who are choosing the change for themselves, you'll be amazed what you can sustain. Now, changing in large organizations is not without risk. Putting yourself out there to be the person who wants to make the change happen involves declaring a position which sometimes is very counter to where the rest of the organization wants to be at the moment. Whether I go back to the examples of Teddy Roosevelt or one of my personal heroes, Admiral Rickover, who founded the nuclear navy, he staked his career on the claim that the Navy needed nuclear power as an asset in their fight. And over the years, as he built a naval nuclear propulsion program, which has safely steamed under nuclear power for 60 years, as he built that, his own organization fought him. And the admirals in the Navy several times wanted to forcibly retire Rickover, even though he was getting amazing outcomes. So he used, what I'm arguing here today, is a policy buffer. He made sure to surround himself with the right behaviors to protect himself from those forces of folks who would rather drive people than drive the change. In his case, his set of explicit behaviors was to court Congress. He would brief them personally on what his program was doing and what it was accomplishing and bypass any Navy filters that could have downplayed his accomplishments. And Congress rewarded him with continuing to protect him so that he could sustain his program. In a small scale, for a change agent in a large organization, this could be something as simple as saying, even though the rest of my group never starts meetings on time, everybody's on their BlackBerrys or their iPhones or whatever, and we never keep minutes, I'm going to choose to start on time, have everybody shut off their electronics so we focus on each other at this moment, except for Marvin. Marvin can stay, right? And we're going to keep minutes so we can share with folks and ourselves what we've accomplished and write it down. And we're going to choose to do that because we're going to buffer ourselves from the bad behaviors that are around us. Just like a project protects its end date with time, we protect change agents with a policy buffer. The other way could be, who are those folks in the organization or outside that when you have a bad day and people are asking you, who told you to do that? And is that your job? And why would we make that change? And attacking you for something you truly believe in. Who will you call to puff you back up, to restore your energy, to restore your belief in yourself? Who will you call on a good day that'll help and sustain you? Maybe those are coworkers, maybe they aren't. But I encourage you, if you believe in making a change, it will not be easy to drive a change, but you can do it. And use this concept of the policy buffer to remind yourself how to protect yourself as you go and make that change. And as you step out and choose to drive change, your first steps will be wobbly. You will look vulnerable. People will wonder what you are doing there. And I illustrate that with a personal story. This little boy in the picture is my son Theodore. This was taken shortly before his 4th birthday. And you'll notice he's walking with forearm crutches. Well, he has those crutches because Teddy was born with spina bifida. At 16 weeks in utero, my husband and I found out that our son's spine hadn't closed all the way, and his nerves were hanging out into a cyst on his back. That means that his legs and his leg muscles wouldn't work as you'd expect, and there would be various other challenges he would have to overcome in his life. Knowing all of this, we chose to name him Theodore Roosevelt Mills, to give him a strong name and a person to look up to who had remade their weak body and done great things. So this picture was taken shortly after Teddy had learned to walk with these forearm crutches. Again, he's almost 4. And before this, he had had to pull along behind him a heavy metal walker. We were at the county fair, and we were sitting on some bleachers watching a friend's teenage daughter play piano and sing. And true to little boys at the fair, he didn't really want to watch a teenage girl play piano and sing. And so, being a mother who wants to raise an independent son, confident in making his own decisions, I let him get down slowly from the bleachers and wander off towards the cow barn. I took this picture as he walked away, and what was interesting is right after this picture, I noticed an odd pattern forming around him. People were looking at this little boy and looking around for his mother, right? Because the statement is always, where is his mother? It's never, where is his father? And as he's walking away, I noticed people they're not even close to him, but they're doing this. They're protecting him from some bad evil that might be soon to attack him, and they're wondering why I'm not standing right over his shoulder. And it looked scary to them. It looked wobbly. What was he doing? Who was in control of this child? What was going to happen to him? And whether well-meaning or not, people started to get closer to him. But I let him continue and gradually got up and followed him from a safe distance because I want to support his independence. But I tell you that story because that's how you might appear to others as you first start to drive change. They're doing it weird. Why do they have those things? Why are they behaving that way? Who let them out of wherever they're supposed to be controlled at? And well-meaning people will try to protect you. And people who don't understand what you're trying to accomplish will try to stop you. But you can choose something different for yourself if you want the future you want. Maybe it's a little bigger payoff than just seeing the cows, but you can make that change. So you can do wonderful and powerful things if you choose to. And all you have to do is take it that one step at a time. And I use this line constantly on my blog, is why not try? And this is the height of my cartooning abilities. Dave uses Hugh to give him his cartoons. I try to make my own. They don't work out as well. But say this is you here saying, someday I'll be the boss and then I can make the change I want to make. And that'll be a great day. And that's me up there, out towards the goal, saying, stop waiting. Start the change with you and others will follow. I've seen it happen. Whether out in the community or in large organizations, you can see it in history. Go back and read the stories of great successes. You'll see the attributes of driving change in the leaders that made it work. Because you can be that change advantage. You don't have to wait for others to change first. You can be that example, that leader, that light for others to follow. Because who are you not to be? So why not try? Because you can become a powerful change leader. Any questions? I can't see questions. But yeah.
If you could come to the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, can you use the microphone, please? Sorry.
So my main question is how? How do we start, right? Because I have heard this and I'm like, yes, I want to change, but then you have all the other things. So how do you really start?
So the question is, how do you start? And one of the basic things is to look at what's the change you really believe in that you're willing to risk and be vulnerable in, defining that. Once you define that, you can say, what are those first steps I would take? And that could be learning a little bit more about who you need to talk to. That could be seeking out to say, does anybody else want to go with me before I start? It's all contextual. But the key is not waiting for someone else. Because if you start to tell yourself, I'll go first, you could probably come up with, brainstorm at 10, 15, 20 things you could try first. And it doesn't really matter what that first step is. It's not a recipe. Dave has a great line he talks about with relying too much on recipe followers and not having chefs. I use that in my training because I really believe in that, is I can't tell you, here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I wished for that. I'm an engineer. I want the procedure, right? It's repeatable. It's not. But the key is if you decide to do it, take some steps, learn from them, take other steps, but you're going to keep yourself moving forward. The contrast is usually, if anybody's ever been on a driving people team, have you ever had the team stop meeting because somebody took your conference room once? You know, oh, well, the conference room's gone. We're never going to meet again. I mean, you stop at every little pebble in the road. But if you're choosing to make the change for yourself, when you encounter a boulder, it's like being out hiking. Are you going to turn around and go back to the car if you drove 3 hours to get to the trailhead? You're going to figure out a way around the boulder. Same thing. Does that help? Are there other questions?
Hi, yeah, could you give me another example of a policy buffer?
Okay, so other examples would be, in one organization that we had, we actually formed a management-approved group that was allowed to think differently. So we needed to have a management protective layer. So sometimes you do it on your own. Sometimes it's like, no, they really have spears and they're going to hit me, so I need to have a little bit of extra protection. So you might need to go there in your maybe small group or larger group of actually going and getting, some people call that a champion, right? Who protects you from the negative antibodies that want to destroy you. Joy is contagious, but there's lots of organizations that seem to have an immunity to joy. So you have to come up with some way to protect yourself.
Thank you.
No problem.
I really enjoyed your talk, April. I drive change. I'm a Scrum coach, Agile coach. Coaching large teams in different parts of the world. Sometimes I feel like that person who has a whip and trying to say, this is what you have to do. You have to do daily stand-up meetings. You have to meet on a fixed schedule, and you have to do your plans and retrospectives and everything like that. How do you really, sometimes I just felt very guilty looking at that slide. Maybe that's me trying to do that, right? So how do you really, sometimes I know what you mean by saying we have to be that change. I have lived that change that you're talking about. But when I'm in a coaching role, when I'm doing this, I really have to take that whip and show the people the path, right? So what thoughts do you have on how can I really, I ask myself, am I being very effective in my role by being that whip, right?
Right.
Is there a better approach than doing that? Because I'm basically showing people the right way to get things done, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you're looking at cross-geo teams and everything like that, you sometimes have to assert yourself and say, guys, this is the way to go, right?
Right.
You cannot say, okay, come with me, I'll show you the way and path, because it's going to take a pretty long time.
Right.
So just want to get your thoughts on that.
Right. So this is going to seem like I'm doing hero worship to Dave, but I'm going to give him another credit. He talks about the difference between putting up lots of stoplights and a roundabout. The difference between a controlled intersection and a roundabout. I'd go to that with it, which is sometimes when we're setting up the rules or the conditions for the team, we set them up like stoplights. Here's the way it's going to be, and I'm the cop who's going to enforce it. And when you run the red light, here's your punishment. That's a driving people sort of way to look at it. You can get the same outcome, but make it the equivalent of a roundabout, which is successful Scrum teams do these things, so why wouldn't we? Okay. Does that, it changes it subtly, but it's significant. Yeah. Yesterday in the talk, we talked about setting necessary conditions, which is that way of setting up that roundabout. So you can say, feel free to hold any sort of meeting which gets these outcomes done. Successful teams do it this way, and that's what I'm going to do with you. So it shows the causality of it, the reason why, not just, I've been sent in as the coach, and here are my rules, and you will obey. Because it's subtle, but it's significant in terms of how people engage with it. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay. I'll admit, I don't have any time up here, so I don't know when I'm done, so. Okay, there's time for another question. Does anybody else have a question? Or you can put them in for the panel. Again, I'll make the pitch for the panel, right? And it is a boy, if you're wondering. Teddy's very happy about that. He has 2 sisters, so.
I'd like to take the opportunity, you have 2 minutes, so I don't want to waste that, right? I was really, loved the speech you gave. Very inspiring, and you connected with the audience. I'm one of them. I will be contacting you later. But my question is, what inspires you? This change agent that you talked about, it's in all of us. It's sleeping, right? Mm-hmm. You're it alive. And I'm sure there has been moment when you got down and you thought that, again, I go in the sleep mode. What keeps you awake? What keeps you, the passion that you have, 8-month baby, and you are here, inspiring us? What keeps you? Is there any other thing that you want to share with this team that can, we can become like you?
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. So there is the part that goes to heredity, right? Which is my grandmother's pushing 90 and never stops. So I always claim that I get this magical reactor of energy from her. But actually what I think is so exciting about being a change agent, you get a little, I'll say it in a positive way, positively addicted to it. When you're getting to do it and seeing other people developing and achieving the changes with you, it keeps me going because there's so much that needs to happen in the world. And there's so many things that people look at and think, well, who am I to get that done? And if I can show them ways to succeed in that and change, the wash of joy that washes over me is just so powerful. The feedback loop is intense. The story I used in the class that I gave yesterday, I'll give on Friday, is we're building the first beyond accessible playground for children with special needs in our county up in Washington. And it came about because a friend of mine whose son has cerebral palsy is in a wheelchair, and she took him to a playground that was accessible. We didn't even know there were such things. And he finally got to play side by side with his sisters. And his mother comes home and says, I have to have this playground, but I have no idea how to do this. April, build me a playground. And because I had done this work and learned these things, I couldn't not leverage that experience. And so we went out and partnered, did the driving change thing, partnered with the city to say, how can we, parents of special needs children, partner with you to build a playground? And in 3 years, we've raised $500,000, gotten every dollar of grant money we've applied for, and we're going to put the playground in this summer. And thanks. And it's so rewarding to see a change in the community that wouldn't happen if we didn't know to leverage these things and do them. And it's surprising how much less energy it takes to drive change than it does to drive people. It still takes a lot of energy, I won't pretend. It's draining some days. Last night I was tired, right? I'll be tired tonight, it's okay. But it's the dollar for dollar, the ounce for ounce, the minute for minute payoff is so much greater that it feeds back. So I'm glad I could spark that in you and look forward to continuing the conversation with anyone who wants to. Thank you so much.